All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Time Daddy, long-term preference character, and high trust culture. Written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. Frethton, here's a thinking process. Analyze user input minus book title, time, daddy, long-term preference character, and high trust culture. Tone style, zealously, androcentric, classical, Christian apologetic, red-pilled, high rhetorical intensity, logical syllogistic, etymological, diagnostic of leftism, restorative of Western patriarchy. Uses integral theory, Wilber, Keegan, Kohlberg, etc. Implicitly, focus on developmental arrest, Darvo, long-term preference versus short-term reactivity, time daddy archetype. Task, write one viral Substack title and subtitle separated by exactly 1 colon in the whole output. Do not use a colon inside the title or subtitle. Sell the integral theory angle, the developmental arrest, and the grow-up, wake-up remedy for men. Output only title and subtitle. Write. I sat in a university conference room and watched a 30-something administrator with a clipboard dismantle a 60-year-old professor's career in 12 minutes. The professor had presented grading data, actual numbers, actual decline, and the administrator responded not with counter data, but with a ritual. He denied the data existed as evidence, attacked the professor's patriarchal performance, reversed the narrative so the data became aggression, and framed himself as victim cum rectifier of historical bias. Junior staff nodded in unison, and the meeting minutes were quietly rewritten before lunch. What I witnessed was not an argument. It was a developmental arrest in institutional clothing, a mind locked at conventional tribal loyalty wearing the vocabulary of post-conventional justice, unable to distinguish evidence from emotion, unable to delay gratification long enough to sit with an uncomfortable number. The theory I want to examine is precisely this: how an entire ideology mistakes emotional realignment for structural competence, and how its rhetoric functions not as reasoning, but as a Darvo reflex preserving a fragile hierarchy that cannot survive scrutiny. Here is what interests me, and here is why I'm writing this for men who still value compound growth, objective reality, and the patience to build something that outlasts them. Every spectacle of ideological dysfunction is also a diagnostic map, a precise chart of where human development got stuck and what the next stage requires. The man who can read this map gains an almost unfair advantage. He sees the architecture of the trap while everyone else is busy decorating the cage. We are not going to mock from the sidelines. Mockery is just another form of helplessness dressed in wit. We are going to use the spectacle as a ladder, reading the developmental arrest in others to diagnose our own, converting every observed contradiction into fuel for the climb upward, and building the kind of long-term structural integrity that no committee, no clipboard, and no rewritten minutes can touch. The era. Darvo in families. Rewriting history to preserve hierarchy. The situation. A mid-level university DEI administrator, male, 30s, leads a departmental review. When a senior professor, male, 60s, cites data showing declining standards in humanities grading, the administrator immediately triggers Darvo. He rewires the narrative, claiming the professor is erasing marginalized voices, performing patriarchal authority, and fearing obsolescence. He mobilizes junior staff, socialized mind, to isolate the professor, rewrites meeting minutes to omit the data, and frames his own promotion as correcting historical bias. The situation is wattled. The ideology's claim to meritocratic progress is structurally unsound, relying on emotional realignment rather than evidence. The arrest is clear. The left's institutional expression has regressed to conventional tribal loyalty and post-conventional pretense, unable to hold tension, delay gratification, or build enduring truth. Core contradiction. It demands men accept short-term emotional punishment, loss of status, income, or reputation, for the long-term good of social justice, while simultaneously denying men the long-term rewards, respect, authority, legacy that their traditional contributions historically secured. Case vignette. The fluorescent panel above conference room 4B had been flickering for 3 weeks. Nobody had filed a work order. Filing a work order meant using your name, and using your name meant somebody might associate you with a position. And having a position was the cardinal sin. Professor Harlenvoss set a single sheet of paper on the table. 12 years of longitudinal data compressed. Grade point averages in the humanities had risen 0.8 points on a 4.0 scale over a decade, while standardized admission scores for the same majors had fallen 140 points. The sheet had 4 citations. One was from the university's own institutional research office. He had not editorialized. He had not argued interpretation. He had brought numbers to a meeting that was supposed to be about numbers. "Before we begin," said Marcus Delp, folding his hands with the practiced serenity of a man who had once done a 10-minute meditation course on LinkedIn Learning, "I want to acknowledge that we are convening on the ancestral lands of the Peoria peoples. Nobody knew if the Peoria peoples had ancestral claims on this region." Marcus had read it on a placard in the Student Union cafeteria, which had itself been researched by a sophomore work-study student who had Googled Native Americans Illinois and picked the first result. Marcus had been repeating the acknowledgement for 14 months. It cost him nothing. That was the point. Everything Marcus said publicly cost him nothing, because every statement was pre-approved by the invisible consensus of whoever happened to be in the room. "Harlan," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with the posture of a therapist, about to ask how that made him feel, "I've reviewed your document, and I want to make sure we're holding space for the context before we center quantitative frameworks." Harlan was 63. He had published 4 books. He had weathered a divorce, a tenure battle in the 90s, and a bout of melanoma. He was not a fragile man. But the phrase "holding space" made his jaw tighten, because he knew what came next, the way a farmer knows what comes after a particular smell in the wind. "The data shows grade inflation," Harlan said. "That's all it shows. I'm not drawing conclusions. I'm asking the committee to look." Marcus nodded slowly. The slow nod was important. The slow nod communicated that he was listening deeply, that he was processing with care, that he was doing the emotional labor of witnessing. The slow nod also bought him 4 seconds to find the angle. "I appreciate that vulnerability," Marcus said. Harlan had not been vulnerable. He had presented a data table. "What I'm hearing underneath the numbers," Marcus continued, "is an anxiety about change. And that's valid. Change is hard, especially when the academy is finally becoming responsive to communities that have been historically marginalized." Janet Polk, a 31-year-old assistant professor of digital media studies who had been hired without a dissertation defense because the university needed her identity demographics for a federal compliance report, leaned forward. "I think what Marcus is gesturing toward is that the very framework of grading is a technology of white supremacist patriarchal assessment." She said this as though she were noting that water was wet. She said this with the serene confidence of someone who had read the sentence in a journal article and adopted it as her own thought, without passing through any gate of skepticism. She had read it therefore it was true. She had felt it, therefore it was real. Janet had a tattoo on her inner wrist that said question everything. She had never questioned the article. Grading, Harlan said, is how we communicate to students whether they have mastered material. According to whose definition of mastery, Marcus said. This was the pivot. Harlan recognized it the way a boxer recognizes a feint. The question was not a question. It was a trap shaped like a question. If Harlan answered according to the discipline's definition, Marcus would say, and who defined the discipline? If Harlan answered according to the faculty's standards, Marcus would say, and the faculty has historically been, and here he would let the word white and male hang in the air without quite saying them. The way a mobster lets you infer the threat. According to the standards that govern every accredited humanities program in the country, Harlan said. The same standards we agreed to when we accepted accreditation. Marcus touched his chin. I think we need to be careful about weaponizing accreditation to silence legitimate concerns about epistemic violence. Epistemic violence. The phrase landed like a perfume-sprayed brick. Harlan noted that Marcus had not addressed a single datum, not one number, not one citation. The 12 years of evidence sat on the table like a dead bird, and Marcus had simply walked around it and begun redecorating the room with abstractions. Marcus, the numbers are not neutral, Marcus said. Kathy O'Neill has shown us that. Ruha Benjamin has shown us that. Quantitative frameworks can reproduce the very inequities they claim to measure. Integral diagnosis. The wattled lie. How ideology rewrites reality and what men must build instead. The theory under examination. The mechanism is called DARVO, Denis, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Originally identified in clinical work with abusers, it describes a precise rhetorical sequence. First, deny the factual claim. Second, attack the character of the person making it. Third, invert the moral geometry, so the truth teller becomes the villain and the liar becomes the wounded party. In families, Darvo preserves a dysfunctional hierarchy by rewriting shared history. The parent who neglected the child claims the child was ungrateful. The spouse who cheated claims the betrayal was the other's coldness. Facts dissolve into feelings, timelines collapse into narratives, and the person who insists on what actually happened is branded cruel for refusing to forgive a fiction. In institutions, the same mechanism operates at scale. A professor presents 12 years of longitudinal grade inflation data, numbers from the university's own research office, no editorializing, 4 citations, and within 90 seconds the conversation pivots to his anxiety about change, his patriarchal authority, his fear of obsolescence. The data is never addressed. The messenger is buried under layers of therapeutic language until the original claim vanishes beneath the sediment of social performance. This is not a bug. It is the operating system. Darvo works because it exploits a vulnerability in high-trust cultures, the assumption that the person expressing pain is telling the truth. When a civilization has spent generations teaching that the worst thing you can do is question a victim's testimony, the first party to claim victimhood wins. Ideology has learned to weaponize this instinct. The trick is simple. Seize the victim position first, seize it loudly, and never let go. Whoever objects becomes the offender by definition. The result is a wattled structure, patched together with emotional appeals, narrative improvisation, and tribal loyalty, appearing solid from a distance but lacking structural integrity. Press on any joint and the whole construction flexes, but nobody presses because pressing is itself recoded as violence. The developmental arrest. Here is the uncomfortable developmental fact. The institutional left's contemporary expression has not advanced beyond conventional tribal loyalty dressed in post-conventional vocabulary. It claims to operate from sophisticated moral reasoning, structural awareness, empathy, historical consciousness, but observe what it actually does when challenged by evidence. It does not integrate the new data. It does not revise its hypotheses. It does not hold the tension between competing goods. It rallies the tribe, rewrites the record, purges the dissenter, and declares the question settled. This is the developmental profile of what researchers call the socialized mind. The self is constituted by belonging to the group. Identity is rented from collective approval, not owned from within. Without the group's validation, there is no self to stand on. The terror of being cancelled is existential terror, the fear of psychological annihilation, not merely social inconvenience. When a mid-level administrator rewrites meeting minutes to omit data that embarrasses his framework, he is not lying strategically. He is performing the only psychological operation his developmental stage permits. The data threatens the group. The group is the self. Therefore, the data threatens the self. Rewriting the minutes is self-preservation at the level of identity. The arrest is visible in the inability to do three things that mature minds take for granted: hold multiple variables in tension, delay gratification for structural integrity, and subject one's own position to the same evidentiary standard applied to opponents. Every one of these failures maps onto a specific developmental model, and everyone has a remedy that men can practice. The core contradiction: strip the rhetoric to the skeleton, and the contradiction becomes surgical. The dominant institutional ideology demands that men accept short-term losses, status, income, reputation, due process as necessary sacrifices for long-term justice. Simultaneously, it dismantles every long-term structure that would reward male contribution: fatherhood as honored office, competence as objective standard, legacy as inheritance, authority as earned right. The demand is: bleed now for a future you are not permitted to build. No civilization survives this equation. It extracts capital from the very population responsible for producing it, then pathologizes the productive behaviors themselves as oppression. Protection, provision, discipline, standards, sacrifice. Each is recoded as domination. The word patriarchy etymologically means father rule, and the ideology uses it exclusively to mean tyranny, never the ordered love that actually governed households for millennia. The linguistic capture makes it impossible to defend fatherhood without sounding like you are defending cruelty. But the root gives another word: patrimony, that which fathers leave, an inheritance, moral, material, spiritual, for those who come after. The culture has severed father rule from patrimony and then wonders why men produce nothing for the future. A man stripped of authority over his own household does not become a willing servant of the collective. He becomes a consumer of the present. He plays the short game. He optimizes for himself because the long game has been made structurally impossible. This is why the ideology must rewrite history. Its own premises require it. If fatherhood produced anything good, law, liberty, science, civic order, the apprentice guilds, the monastic preservation of knowledge, then the narrative of patriarchal oppression as pure extraction collapses. So the history must be rewritten. The data must be buried, and anyone who unearths either must be darvoed into silence. The professor who brought a data sheet to a data meeting was not violating protocol, he was violating mythology. And mythology in a decaying institution outranks mathematics. The integral map. The dysfunction is not isolated. It repeats across every developmental model that psychology has produced. Trace the pattern through each, and the remedy emerges with the precision of a differential diagnosis. Piaget concrete operational arrest. The mind that cannot separate the concept of merit from the identity of the person displaying it has not reached formal operations. It treats complex social systems as binary objects: oppressor or oppressed, guilty or innocent, powerful or powerless. The abstraction that a single individual can possess both privilege and disadvantage, that a policy can be emotionally satisfying and structurally ruinous. That correlation is not causation. These require the capacity to hold multiple variables simultaneously. The concrete mind cannot do this. It sorts the world into piles and panics when a datum refuses its pile. The remedy: practice formal and post-formal thinking deliberately. Hold two truths in tension without resolving them prematurely. When presented with a binary, ask: what third variable is being excluded? What causal mechanism connects the claim to the evidence? The trained mind does not reach for the first emotionally satisfying category. It sits with complexity until the pattern clarifies. Kahlberg, conventional tribal morality. The institutional left has not advanced to post-conventional reasoning, where universal principles override group consensus. It operates at the conventional stage. Obedience to the group's norms is the highest good. The group determines what is just, and justice is whatever serves the coalition. This is why the same behavior earns either praise or condemnation depending purely on who commits it. The principle is not the principle. The person is the principle. The remedy: codify your own moral framework on natural law and first principles, then act on it regardless of applause. Post-conventional morality does not mean abandoning community. It means choosing your community based on shared principle rather than shared grievance. The man who can articulate why he believes what he believes and can survive being the only one who believes it has left the tribal stage permanently. Keegan, the socialized mind. Identity rented from external validation collapses the moment validation withdraws. The socialized mind cannot disagree with the room because the room is the self. Cancellation is not social awkwardness for this mind, it is ego death. Everything possible will be sacrificed to prevent it: data, friendship, conscience, career integrity. The remedy: achieve the self-authoring mind, generate your own standards, boundaries, and values from within. This does not mean isolation. It means your core identity is not a lever anyone else can pull. A man who has authored himself can walk into any room, hear any argument, absorb any rejection, and remain intact. He chooses his brothers, he does not beg them for permission to exist. Erikson stalled generativity. The culture of consumption is the culture of men who stopped producing legacy. Entertainment replaces purpose. Comfort replaces flourishing. The institutional left optimizes for short-term emotional signaling, statements, acknowledgements, land declarations that cost nothing and build less. Generativity requires decades, raising children, mentoring successors, building institutions that outlast the body. A stalled man consumes, a generative man cultivates. The remedy: invest in what outlives you, children. Mentorship, craft, institutions. The shift from consumer to cultivator is the most important temporal reorientation a man can make. Your time horizon determines your identity. Freud: id-driven reactivity in superegoic costume. Outrage is instant gratification wearing a clerical collar. The left's moral posturing is not virtue. It is appetite rationalized. The ego, too weak to govern the ID, recruits the superego to justify every impulse as justice. Punch a Nazi is not courage. It is the ID seeking permission to be violent while the superego provides the paperwork. The remedy: strengthen the ego through disciplined, delayed gratification. Train your body. Train your attention fast. Save. Do the hard thing first. A man whose ego can govern impulse does not need ideology to justify his desires. He has already disciplined them into something useful. Jung, shadow projection. The ideology that accuses patriarchy of fragility, control, and cruelty is projecting its own unexamined shadow onto an external enemy. It cannot own its own need for dominance, its own fragility, its own cruelty. So it assigns those qualities to men generally and then demands men manage the projection. This is not justice. It is psychological colonizer behavior dressed as liberation. The remedy: daily honest self-audit. Own your capacity for anger, dominance, aggression, and cruelty. Not so you can indulge them, but so they cannot be used against you by projection. A man who has integrated his shadow cannot be gaslit into believing he is only his darkness. He knows what he carries. He carries it deliberately. Adler: inferiority compensation through narrative mastery. The person who cannot achieve genuine competence in a craft or discipline compensates by mastering the grammar of victimhood. If you cannot build, you can at least deconstruct what others have built and call it justice. The DEI administrator who has never published scholarship, never built a department, never trained a student, his path to status is not competence. It is the fluent recitation of grievance vocabulary. The remedy: pursue genuine social interest and courage. Serve your family, your craft, your community through earned skill. Competence is the only status that cannot be revoked by a committee vote. Build something they cannot deconstruct because they do not understand how it stands. Leuvinger, Kuckgruter, conformist ego development. The conformist measures worth against external validation. The autonomous stage, where internal authority replaces external approval, is the prerequisite for genuine integrity. Without it, every position is a costume worn for the audience present. The remedy: practice holding internal authority, accept contradiction without anxiety. Refine your standards through experience, not consensus. The autonomous man can say, "I was wrong," without identity collapse, and "I was right," without needing the room to agree. Graves' spiral dynamics, green meme collapse. Pluralism has devolved into relativism, all hierarchy is demonized. The inability to distinguish order from oppression produces paralysis and then resentment, because paralyzed people always blame the structure. The green meme cannot build, it can only deconstruct. It cannot integrate, it can only signal inclusivity while purging dissenters. It claims to value all perspectives while enforcing the narrowest ideological conformity since the Inquisition. The remedy: second-tier integral thinking. See every developmental level as functional within its proper context. Transcend and include rather than reject and destroy. The integral mind can use tribal loyalty when appropriate, achievement logic when appropriate, pluralist sensitivity when appropriate, and can identify when each has become pathological. This is not relativism. It is precision. Maslow, deficiency motivation. The culture is stuck in deficiency needs: esteem, recognition, belonging. It chases validation from systems designed to withhold it. Every gesture is a plea for approval. Every denunciation is a bid for status. Self-actualization requires moving beyond the need for external validation into contribution. Self-transcendence, the highest level, means serving something so much larger than yourself that the question of recognition becomes irrelevant. The remedy: serve a cause, a faith, a family, a craft. Find meaning in contribution, not applause. The man working for legacy has already left the deficiency economy. Fowler, synthetic conventional faith. Beliefs inherited uncritically from tribe or institution are fragile. They collapse under first serious interrogation, which is why their holders react to questions as violence. A mature faith has been examined, doubted, tested, owned as a voluntary act. It holds firm under pressure because it was built under pressure. The remedy: critically examine your own commitments. Subject your inherited worldview to the same scrutiny you apply to the opposing one. What survives that fire is yours. What does not survive was never yours to begin with. Practice ladder for men. The Time Daddy ladder: grow up, wake up, clean up, show up. A 12-rung practical ladder for men who sense they were built for more than consumption. Each rung maps to developmental architecture, skip none. Climb in order but revisit each continually. Every rung asks, what can be done today? Rung 1: secure the animal. Developmental layer: Maslow's deficiency needs. Spiral dynamics: beige pupil. Freud's oral and anal organization. Erickson's trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame. Your body is the base layer of every system above it. If you sleep poorly, eat garbage, and cannot lift your own body weight, no philosophy will save you. The animal must be housed before the man can think. Freud was right about this much. Unregulated bodily appetite colonizes the mind. The man who cannot govern his sleep, his plate, and his lifts cannot govern anything. Do today. Train your body with compound movements: deadlift, squat, overhead press. Eat protein. Sleep 8 hours. Make your bed. These are not trivial gestures. They are declarations that matter obeys will, starting with your own mattress. Rung 2: impose order on time. Developmental layer: Erickson's autonomy versus shame and doubt. Freud's anal organization, mastery, boundary control. Spiral dynamics red-blue transition. Piaget's pre-operational, concrete operational shift. A man without a schedule is a leaf. He goes where the wind of notification, appetite, and mood carries him. Order is not oppression, it is the precondition of freedom for, the structure that makes purposeful action possible. The child learns no and discovers selfhood. The man who never internalizes that no remains a child in adult skin. Do today. Write tomorrow's schedule tonight. Block 4 hours of deep, uninterrupted work. Cut one dopamine source. Pornography, scroll feed, video games, for 24 hours experience the discomfort. That discomfort is the feeling of a self-forming. Rung 3, build competence that reality tests. Developmental layer, Piaget's concrete operational reasoning. Erikson's industry versus inferiority. Adler's striving for superiority through useful contribution. Spiral dynamics, blue discipline. Feelings are not skills. Intentions are not results. The concrete operational mind learns that the world has rules that do not bend for your mood. A craft teaches what therapy cannot. That you are not the center of the universe, that wood has grain, that code has syntax, that a wrench does not care about your childhood. Competence is the only self-esteem that reality ratifies. Do today, spend 90 minutes learning a tangible skill, carpentry, programming, engine repair, a foreign language, drawing. Something where wrong answers produce visible failure and right answers produce something you can touch or use. Track progress in a notebook. Rung 4, master the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. Developmental layer, commons' hierarchical complexity, capacity for coordinating abstractions, Piaget's formal operational reasoning, Gebser's mental structure of consciousness, Kohlberg's conventional, post-conventional bridge. The classical trivium is the West's forgotten immune system against lies. Grammar locks definitions. Logic tests whether those definitions cohere. Rhetoric deploys truth memorably and persuasively. A man who cannot define his terms, detect contradictions, and speak clearly is furniture in someone else's argument. He will be moved, not moving. Do today, take one contested word, equality, justice, patriarchy, privilege, harm, and write its dictionary etymology, its current usage, and how the shift occurred. Then construct one syllogism using the classical definition. Watch how quickly ideological arguments collapse when their stolen words are reclaimed. Rung 5, detach from the socialized mind. Developmental layer. Kagan's socialized mind, self-authoring mind transition. Lovinger, Cook-Gruter's conformist, conscientious shift. Fowler's synthetic conventional, individuative reflective faith state. Spiral dynamics, orange emergence. The socialized mind is constituted by others' expectations. It cannot distinguish its own values from the group's because it is the group internalized. This is why cancellation works. It attacks the self's foundation. The man climbing this rung begins to hear the borrowed voices in his own skull. His mother's anxiety, his professor's ideology, his peer group's approval script, and separates inherited noise from chosen conviction. Do today list 5 beliefs you hold. For each ask, would I still believe this if everyone I admired rejected it? If the answer is no, that belief is not yours yet, it is rented. Begin the work of ownership or honest abandonment. Rung 6, integrate the shadow. Developmental layer, Jung's shadow, projection, anima integration, Freud's ego, superego negotiation, Adler's compensation and courage. Every quality you despise in others is a disowned fragment of yourself, projected outward. The man who cannot own his aggression becomes passive-aggressive. The man who cannot own his sexuality becomes either Puritan or predator. The man who cannot own his capacity for dominance becomes a servant who resents his master. Integration is not indulgence. It is bringing the rejected energy under the governance of conscious will, converting it from symptom to virtue. Do today, name one trait that enrages you in other men. Now find the last time you expressed it, or wanted to. Write it down without euphemism. The shadow you refuse to own will govern your life, and you will call it fate. Rung 7, adopt post-conventional morality. Developmental layer, Kohlberg's post-conventional stages 5 to 6, Kagan's self-authoring mind. Erikson's identity versus role, confusion resolved. Maslow's self-actualization, esteem needs met. Conventional morality asks, what does my group approve? Post-conventional morality asks, what is true and just, even if no one applauds? This is not rebellion. Rebellion is still defined by the group it opposes. Post-conventional morality is defined by principle. It is harder, lonelier, and the only footing from which a man can resist a mob, whether the mob wears jackboots or HR lanyards. Compact stage map. Wilbur, a cow. Stuck pattern, retreat into subjective feelings and performative gestures while ignoring objective, structural reality. Upward practice build the lower right quadrant, trained body, financial reserves, tangible craft, documented evidence. Let external structure be so solid that internal narrative cannot shake it. Piaget, stuck pattern, concrete operational thinking that reduces civilization's complexity to binary oppressor versus oppressed, incapable of separating merit from identity or holding variables in tension. Upward practice, cultivate formal and post-formal operations, hold multiple variables simultaneously, tolerate ambiguity, analyze systems across decades rather than headlines. Kohlberg, stuck pattern, conventional tribal morality, where obedience to the group's emotional consensus replaces objective justice, and social approval is the highest court. Upward practice, ascend to post-conventional reasoning, codify your own moral principles based on natural law, truth, duty, and competence, then act on them regardless of applause or condemnation. Kegan, stuck pattern, the socialized mind, constituted entirely by others' expectations, terrified of cancellation because identity is externally rented, not internally owned. Upward practice, achieve the self-authoring mind, generate your own values, standards, and boundaries. Choose your brotherhood by shared principle, not shared sentiment. Erickson, stuck pattern, stalled generativity, consuming culture rather than producing legacy, mistaking entertainment for purpose and comfort for flourishing. Upward practice, fatherhood, mentorship, and building. Raise children, train younger men, create works that outlast your body. Shift from consumption to cultivation. Freud, stuck pattern, ID-driven emotional reactivity masked by superegoic moral posturing, where outrage is instant gratification and justice is the ego's rationalization for impulse. Upward practice, strengthen the ego through disciplined delayed gratification, lifting, saving, fasting, deep work. Train reason to govern appetite. Jung, stuck pattern, shadow projection accusing external enemies of the darkness you refuse to own, demanding others manage what you will not integrate. Upward practice, daily honest self-audit. Own your capacity for anger, dominance, lust, and cruelty. Integrate them as energy for protection, discipline, and order. Adler, stuck pattern, inferiority compensation through ideological dominance, seeking superiority by mastering the grammar of victimhood rather than the grammar of competence. Upward practice, pursue genuine social interest and courage. Serve your family and community through earned skill, not narrative capture. Löwinger, Cook-Gruder, stuck pattern, conformist or rigidly conscientious ego development, measuring worth against external validation or brittle rule-keeping, unable to tolerate paradox or self-critique. Upward practice, move toward the autonomous stage, hold internal authority, accept contradiction, refine standards through experience rather than approval. Graves, spiral dynamics, stuck pattern, the green meme, where pluralism collapses into relativism, all hierarchy is demonized, and the inability to distinguish order from oppression produces paralysis and resentment. Upward practice, transition to second-tier integral thinking, see every level as functional in context, transcend and include, deploy the right tool for the actual conditions. Maslow, stuck pattern, deficiency motivation, endlessly chasing esteem, recognition, and belonging from systems designed to withhold them, never moving beyond consumption of validation. Upward practice, pursue self-transcendence, serve a cause, a faith, a family, a craft larger than your status needs. Find meaning in contribution, not applause. Fowler, stuck pattern, synthetic conventional faith inherited uncritically from tribe or institution, unexamined and therefore fragile, collapsing under first serious interrogation. Upward practice, develop individuative, reflective, and then conjunctive faith. Critically examine inherited commitments, own them as voluntary acts, then hold them with mature nuance that integrates doubt without surrender. Common stuck pattern, low hierarchical complexity, unable to coordinate multiple abstract systems or synthesize competing frameworks into higher order understanding. Upward practice, study across disciplines, history, theology, law, biology, economics, and practice integrating their insights into a coherent, testable worldview. I have walked through the fire of this diagnosis with you, and I will not pretend the embers are cold. The institutions are captured. The language is stolen. The family is under siege. The dragon has teeth, and it has eaten fathers for breakfast for 3 generations, but I have also told you what I know to be true. The dragon cannot eat what has not been offered. Every man who refuses to kneel is a stone the beast chokes on. Every father who reads to his son, every craftsman who sharpens his blade before dawn, every divorced man who cleans his rented room and calls it a beginning. These are not gestures, they are fortifications. The lie cannot build what we are building. It can only mock, and mocking is not architecture. Sponsored book: Time Daddy, Long-Term, Preference Character, and High Trust Culture. You were lied to, not gently misled, not accidentally misinformed. You were lied to systematically, deliberately, and with malice about time, money, masculinity, and what it means to win at life. They told you to live for the moment. They called patience weakness. They mocked your restraint, pathologized your discipline, and then laughed when you collapsed under the weight of short-term thinking. I know, I lived it. I spent 23 years trying to be nice, to follow the rules, to wait my turn, while the world rewarded liars, manipulators, and women who weaponized emotion against logic. I watched empires of men crumble not from war or famine, but from internal rot, men who forgot how to wait, to build, to endure. I was one of them until I stopped. And when I did, I saw the truth. Time is not a resource. It's a weapon. And the men who master it don't just survive, they dominate. This book is not for everyone. It is not for the emotionally volatile. It is not for women who demand validation. It is not for men who cry when criticized or retreat into victimhood at the first sign of resistance. If you are one of those people, close this book now. Go watch a Netflix series, scroll TikTok, whine to your therapist. This is not for you. This is for the man who has seen the betrayal, the man whose loyalty was repaid with abandonment, whose honesty was punished, whose long-term planning was mocked as toxic masculinity. This is for the man who knows that civilization is not built on feelings, but on delayed gratification, compound interest, and the quiet, relentless grind of character. If you are that man, this book will save your life. I spent a decade studying philosophy, economics, evolutionary psychology, and history, not in an ivory tower, but in the trenches. I tested every idea in the real world, in business, in relationships, in fitness, in fatherhood. I learned that low-time preference, the ability to delay reward for greater future gain, is the single most predictive trait of success, trust, and legacy. It is why the West built cathedrals over centuries. It is why men like Edison, Tesla, and Washington didn't quit when others did. It is why your grandfather could wait 10 years to earn respect, why your nephew quits a job after 3 months, because the boss wasn't nice. This book reveals how gynocentric culture, feminism, and cultural Marxism have systematically destroyed this trait in men, replacing it with emotional reactivity, instant gratification, and dependency. And it shows you exactly how to rebuild it. You will learn how to outlast the dopamine addicts, how to build wealth through compound growth, not lottery mentalities, how to forge unbreakable character through discipline, not therapy, how to restore high-trust relationships by being the man who keeps his word forever. You will discover why fitness is not about six-pack abs, but about proving to yourself that you can commit to a long-term project. Why fatherhood is the ultimate investment. Why education must return to the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, so men can think, not just react. This is not theory. This is war doctrine for the mind, body, and soul. The world is burning because men stopped thinking in decades and started thinking in minutes. The media drowns you in distraction. Feminism teaches women to extract value now with no reciprocity. Cultural Marxism frames self-control as oppression. But the time daddy, the man who thinks in generations, who builds empires of value that outlive him, this man is the antidote. He does not rage, he plans. He does not beg for love, he earns loyalty. He does not demand equality, he creates superiority through action. This book is his manifesto. Read it, apply it, become it, or get out of the way. Time Daddy, Long-Term Preference Character and High Trust Culture, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.